Hello, for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Meredith Hawkins, one of the priest associates at Christchurch St. James. It's very sad for me that I can't be present at the barbecue honoring Father David's retirement, and I was thankful instead to have the opportunity to record a brief testimonial to Father David and to why he will be so missed. I first met Father David at the beginning of my second year of seminary. Was so excited to be introduced to Christchurch St. James and the wonderful life there. And I had a meeting by Zoom with Father David. Now, I was excited to find Christchurch St. James. Father David was excited that there was a seminarian coming from New York because he made the assumption, of course, that I would be a Rangers fan and that he would have found kindred spirits. So in fact, the day that I first attended church, Father David had brought out all of his Rangers regalia. And for the children's message, he made it very Rangers focused. And I think was hoping, of course, that he would be finding someone like-minded with me. Sadly, I really knew hardly anything about the Rangers. And I think if it was anybody other than Father David, he might have been very disappointed in me. But I would say that generous spirited as he is, he was still more than willing to have me take an active part in the church life, encouraged me in preaching and leading groups and so on, and was really such a supportive mentor to me. Now, given all of this and how grateful I was, I wanted from the depth of my heart to somehow get involved with the Rangers. And I was one night boarding a plane from New York to Toronto, and what do you know? There were two tall, very fit-looking young men dressed up in Rangers jerseys, and there was a man with them that looked like he was their coach. When they got off, they picked up this incredibly impressive package of hockey sticks, and I thought, oh my goodness, I've got to tell Father David. I just can't wait to tell Father David about who I almost rubbed shoulders with on this plane. I was with the real Rangers. So anyway, I could have kept note of the names on their jerseys and was so excited to go and look them up, and discovered that those players hadn't played with the Rangers for over 10 years. These guys had been wearing classic Rangers jerseys, but they were not the Rangers. To make it even clearer, I learned later that the Rangers, the real Rangers, were actually playing that night in Madison Square Garden. Well, at least it was a story to tell Father David. Also, in Father David's credit, when I was ordained a priest last September at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine, Father David flew all the way to New York just for a short time in order to see me ordained, and he didn't even get to see the Rangers playing. And that, I would say, is ultimately the mark of a very supportive mentor. In fact, going the extra mile would be something that we would say would epitomize Father David and his priesthood. And there's so many instances that I can think of. Father David being the first one to go to greet the truck at the food bank. Father David driving up to Parry Sound to pick up a parishioner who had been injured at the camp. Well, at one point, I was struggling with a seminary assignment. It had a question. There's people in your parish who have had a grandchild who died, and the funeral was at your church and everything was great and you were able to be supportive, but the burial was going to be 5-hour drive north late on a Saturday, and they wanted to know, would you be willing to go to do the burial? Although there were other priests in that town that could have done so. So I was struggling because I was thinking how late I would get back on a Saturday night and having to preach on Sunday. So I threw this question to Father David, and he just immediately answered, no hesitation. He said, of course I would go. He said, over my life as a priest, that's been my tendency. I've gone considerable distances to be there for the people in my parish. And he said, they remember that. And so I wrote that in my essay, and I attributed it to Father David, but it was a lesson that I will never forget, and something I think his message about how people will never forget is something that is going to stick with me. And I can only hope that I would be able to be as generous spirited as he is. Now, as I gather with you remotely, and as we celebrate the wonderful, wonderful years of Father David at Christ Church St. James, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you did for me, and to say, please let this not be a goodbye. We want so much for you to stay in touch. All of our very, very best to Father David, to Esther, and to Buddy in this exciting new part of your lives. Hooray and hooray, hooray.